Marin County, California is considered by many to be the birthplace of mountain biking. It's here where mountain bikes were first invented, but back in the 70s, they were originally called clunkers.
My 10-speed wouldn't work in this town, so I got a hot rod and have nothing but fun ever since.
Clunkers are great if you got the moxie.
This is an old twin. This is an old twin.
This is an old twin.
And I'm riding a 1940 Twin Spitfire with 1980 improvements.
Yeah, this is one of those $1,300 handmade frames and custom components.
See this frame right here? Cost me $5.
I'm ready, but my stomach's all upset. This is an old twin.
Clunker is a balloon-tired bicycle. We have several of them here. It's essentially an old newspaper boy bicycle that's been converted to use in the mountains. They have evolved to $1,500.
Oh yeah, well, I've been getting in shape all my sports.
12, 15, 18 speed, highly sophisticated pieces of machinery.
Whatever happened to those old clunkers? Do you think used mountain bikes can still be found in this little corner of the Golden State? Come with me and let's travel to Marin County, California by changing the settings on Facebook Marketplace. And let's find out what kind of vintage mountain bikes are waiting for us. So here's our first mountain bike, and it's a Corsaro mountain bike with Suntour XC roller cam shifters, derailleurs, Sugino new WTB. I think that a few things jump out at me immediately. One is the brand Corsaro. I'm not familiar with this, Corsaro America. It is a lugged steel bike, uses Tange 5 tubes. And it looks pretty much like a standard mountain bike, but with the exception of these roller cam brakes. And this is a brake design that you see kind of rarely on mountain bikes and hybrids. I think like from the early to mid 80s. I think this was one of those innovations that didn't quite work out. I've worked on a few of these. I have found them kind of difficult to adjust. They're very big and bulky. I mean, they have plenty of stopping power if you dial them in, but I think that the biggest downside to these compared to cantilever brakes, which I think they were designed to replace, is just that you can't kind of like detach them and pull your wheels off. So they're a lot less convenient than cantilever brakes. I'm not a big fan, but it is interesting seeing that. And I think unfortunately the thing is, if you were to remove this, the post is not your standard cantilever or linear brake post. Like, I don't think there's a pin there that you can actually insert into. So I could be wrong on that, but that's what I remember working on these. But in this one, it looks like the fork has a mid-fork eyelet, which is always a nice little touch. We have nice friction thumb shifters. Again, there's another shot of the roller cam. So yeah, as you can see, I mean, it's similar to like a center pull or like a cantilever brake setup where you have the cable going down the middle, and then it'll pull on that yoke. And because the yoke is has those angles, the brake will ride up on those cams and then pinch the brake pads into the rim. That's basically how it works, and that's why it's called a cam system. We've got a nice triple crank, which is part of a triple crank set. Got nice pedals there. I'm sure a lot of this stuff is aftermarket, but it's in really good shape. Yeah, all in all, this is a really nice bike, and it's built solid as a tank. I think for me, the only downside would be those brakes. So next up, we have a vintage Miata Trail Runner in metallic gray. And I really like this bike, and I really like this ad. And I'm just going to geek out a little bit and talk about why this is such a good Facebook Marketplace bike ad. First off, you know, they tell you the model, and then they just give a list of all the good stuff. And if you have like good parts on the bike and you think that that's going to appeal to someone who knows about bikes, then it's worth listing them out. So they talk about the triple drivetrain, the Nito Technomic stem, Velo Orange sweepback bars. We have Suntour thumb shifters, Seguno cranks, Araya alloy rims on Suntour hubs, Schwalbe City tread tires, and a Brooks professional saddle. They give a size of rider, and that's great because most casual bikers aren't going to know if they take a 19-inch or like a 21-inch or whatever. 600 or best offer. Also, great pictures here. Uncluttered background. You can tell that it was either an overcast day or they took this picture either early in the morning or later in the day. You don't have those really harsh shadows in the back. So really good example of nicely done pictures. And we're looking at the drive side. So good job there. Here you can see the Technomic stem. Those are just super long. And you see the handlebars. This is a really nice combo to me. I actually think that installing a long stem on your bike is one of the best upgrades you can do, because all other things being equal, that improves your riding posture by a lot. So if you want to have a more comfortable ride, look into that for sure. It may require installing longer housing and cables, but it's well worth it, and it's going to be cheaper than trying to buy like cruiser bars or riser bars and then and bring up your posture that way. So those are really good. I'm a big fan of those. These are really nice tires. They basically set this up as kind of like a city bike that has all of these gears. And, you know, if you live in a mountainous city or like a San Francisco or somewhere with hills, that's a really good deal. You have those really nice, those components, great derailleur, great Brooks saddle, and just a very comfortable ride overall. Here's a really nice example again of a photo. Notice how the bike is filling the frame. That's great. I mean, there's no reason to take a picture of everything else in your backyard. You may as well just like zoom in, or better yet, move closer to the bike and take this picture. I consider this a 3/4 shot. And also notice that the camera is actually a little bit lower than the head tube, so you're kind of like shooting up on the bike, and it's just, to me, a really photogenic way of taking a picture of the bike. Close up there of the brand, and here are those handlebars. So these are really nice Velo Orange types, kind of that sweepback design and a slight rise. So these handlebars are going to be pretty high. Another thing that happens when you have these handlebars and the stem is that you do get flex. But that's not necessarily a bad thing, because it's actually really comfortable to feel the shock being absorbed by that part of the bike. Very nice. The only thing here is, they have the thumb shifters kind of on the insides, and they kind of go up and down. Ergonomically, I'm not crazy about that, but that's oftentimes how it's done. I think that it would probably be better if those were on top, but then it's not going to look quite as clean. Here we get a close shot of the cantilever brakes and also the tire treads. Those are, almost racing slicks, really. You don't have to splash out on these. There are a lot cheaper ones on Amazon. Same thing with the stem. You can basically replicate this build probably for, around $150 in parts, but then you'd have to find a good mountain bike candidate. Great finish on that paint. Not a great head batch, but it is what it is. And then here we have like a 3/4 back shot. And again, the camera is slightly up, so you get to appreciate the contours of the handlebars. It is a great looking bike. Here's a triple crank set, nice weathered seat, great pedals. Another thing that I really like about this bike is how they've really covered those 3 contact points. You have really nice grips, comfortable. You've got a great Brooks comfortable saddle, and you have pedals that are going to provide plenty of surface area for your feet. And that, combined with some really good tires, will just make for a really comfortable ride. And if this bike is your size, there are going to be few bikes that just sort of feel as natural and comfortable. This is great. I'm really impressed by the work that was done. And I think that this is a fantastic bike. And quite frankly, I think that this is probably the best kind of bike that a person can buy or build for an all-around city kind of commuter bike. It can do virtually anything, maybe except, like intense mountain biking, ironically. But it is such a solid, amazing build, and I just love it. I think this is just, for me, 9.5 out of 10 stars, except for those thumb shifters. And if I was being really OCD, I would say put that crank down at like the 5 o'clock position rather than the 3. But I admire the fact that they are trying to line it up with the chainstays. Anyway, great job here. Is this worth $599? I think that if you work on bikes, you probably know that you can pick one of these bikes up for $50 and then spend another $150 and have basically the same bike. So if you work on bikes, it's probably not worth it to you. If you don't work on bikes, I would say it's probably money well spent, because you won't find one of these just sort of floating around in a bike store. And if you did try to customize this with the help of a bike store, it would probably be maybe even more than this. So I think it's a good deal, and I'm impressed. So here's a really cool bike. This one is a mountain bike by Gary Fisher. It's the Hooku Eiku. Nice example of a vintage mountain bike, maybe despite the cultural appropriation. It's a vintage 87 or 88. We can see it's TIG welded, good condition. Not sure the frame size. It looks like a 19-inch, I think. Couple nicks in the frames, but all in all, pretty good condition. There's not a lot of pictures here, but from what we can see, it's your typical 26-inch wheel with nice cantilever brakes, thumb shifters, straight bars. We've got a mirror there. We've got the cage, triple crank set. We do have the U-brake on the chain stays, the little kickstand there. Pretty nice bike. This it's pretty small. I'm not sure what kind of tubes these are, but I would imagine they're chromoly. One of the nice things about these Gary Fishers is that the stems are in the same colors as the frame, which is a nice touch. But all in all, pretty nice bike. This one is $175 down from $300. That seems a little bit reasonable to me. I don't know what the bike market is out there. I've actually seen a lot of cheap bikes just kind of browsing around that area. But definitely, I think $175. $300 seems a little bit high for what it is. It doesn't have a lot of recognition out there among casual cyclists, and a lot of casual cyclists aren't going to be looking for a mountain bike specifically, and they probably don't realize that it's just as good, if not better, than most hybrids. So, okay, and this next one is also what appears to be one of those mid-'80s era mountain bikes. This one's a Diamondback mountain bike, 26-inch tires. It's an Ascent. It's been sold. Not surprising, because to me that's a pretty great price for one of these mountain bikes. So looking a little bit closer at these pictures, I think this is a TIG welded frame. I had an Ascent a while back. It was a gray one, probably around this era, and I turned it into more of a like touring camping rig, but then eventually ended up selling it. This one has typical your flat bars, you have your thumb shifters, you have an adjustable stem. I have a feeling that's probably aftermarket, and I'm not sure what that thing is on the stem itself. We have cantilever brakes, big beefy forks. We have a triple crank that is part of a triple crank set. We also have the U-brake underneath the chainstay, which my old Diamondback also had. Nice component there of rear derailleur and probably an aftermarket seat. So this is a really nice looking bike to me. Pretty decent shape, and for $60, can't beat it. So I think I misspoke a little bit before. The camping / touring bike that I built was actually this model, the Apex. And here we see a Diamondback Apex mountain bike, and it's being sold for $185. This is a really nice bike. Here we can see there's a Tange Falcon headset. It's got some TIG welding, typical alloy rims, a triple chain ring. You've got one of those interesting stems that has a little roller to direct the brake cable down. Thumb shifters, flat bars. There's another shot of the stem, pretty long stem, but just high quality components all around. And I think that I got my Apex for around $50, and I was doing a lot of camping that summer, and I put on a couple of baskets. It was pretty good, but with all that gear on it, to be honest with you, it was really squirrely to ride around. And I took it on a bunch of nice trips, but ultimately I sold it to somebody who wanted to do a little bit more touring. They're really nice bikes, really weird paint job. I'm not super crazy about it, but the build quality is super high. And this one seems to be in really good shape. $185, I think it's probably worth it. This is also a bigger frame, and they're a little bit more rare. So if you're a tall person and you're looking for a really good mountain bike, this is a great deal. I have a feeling, I don't know exactly what the year is, but I have a feeling this is probably a little bit later, in the 80s at least. But quite an interesting bike. Only downside is you have that U-brake on the chainstays, and I'm just not a big fan, but it is what it is. So our next bike here is a Shogun vintage mountain bike, being sold for $200, marked down from $300. And Shoguns are pretty nice. This one has that interesting bull moose type of stem that then has a bracket that takes handlebars. So lots of hardware there. Probably not the lightest thing in the world, but you have it looks like lugged construction. I really like these old mountain bikes, but I especially love the lugged steel bikes. We've got a nice triple crank set there, big pedals. This person obviously has used this bike for a lot of touring. They've got tons of bags there, a robust rack. They've got the fenders. They have some pretty fat tires on there. They've got thumb shifters. They got a little bit of everything. I think that, yeah, if you got this bike, I would probably just strip everything off and give it a really good clean and polish, and then sort of build it back up a little bit more minimally for me personally. But I think that this is awesome, because when you see one of these bikes, this obviously suited them very well, and it's cool to see a bike like this being used. MTB1 is the model. Very, very cool bike. This is a really good example where, like, this bike could look really great, but there's just all this stuff in the background. The lighting is weird. They're basically taking a picture into the sun, so the exposure gets messed up. If you want to get the maximum amount of money, like, just clean the bike. I would take a lot of this stuff off of it. If you decide to sell it, you're not going to be camping with it, so take all that stuff off of it, put it up against a nice wall, and take proper pictures like that one we saw with the Miata. You can see the shadow in the background, so this is a good example of, like, being mindful about where the sun is relative to your subject. The sun's casting some really harsh shadows. Not that the background's any good anyway, but if you were to wait a little bit longer or shoot in the morning or shoot on an overcast day, you wouldn't have that stuff. So, you might not look at this and say, gosh, those shadows are so ugly, but your brain recognizes it, and that doesn't help express what the value is of this bike. So $200, is this a good deal? I think this is an okay deal, but you can get better, I think. This is an interesting bike. This is a vintage Spalding blade mountain bike, and if you're not from the US, like, Spalding is it's kind of like an old school sports brand here. Like, they make footballs and basketballs and stuff. Apparently they have bikes as well. So not a highly recognized bike brand, but I mean, look what you have here. You've got lugged construction. I don't see any sort of decal about what the frame is made out of. I've worked on a few Spaldings, and they're not bad bikes. I mean, the sports company itself doesn't make bikes. They're just going to get a bike from a central manufacturer and chuck their branding on it and spec some cheaper components, which this certainly has. But it's got, the typical thumb shifters, the friction shifters that will literally last forever. It's got some decent quality levers. You've got the cantilever brakes, quick release on the front, alloy rims. Tires seem to be in good shape. We have, I think that's a double crank. I would probably swap that out. Probably a cheap rear derailleur, cheap saddle and stuff. So not like the greatest spec'd bike in the world, but a very cool little mountain bike frame. So I would see this as having a lot of potential. So cool little bike, and you know, for $40 down from $60, rare 80s mountain bike, rides good and everything works, and the price is firm. That's a pretty good deal. I mean, I hate to part out bikes and stuff, but like even if you just get this for the frame, that's an awesome deal. Okay, the last bike is this vintage Schwinn Mesa Runner, selling for $35 down from $40. It's the original owner, vintage enthusiasts to the rescue, final price. If they're the original owner, I imagine they've had this bike for a while, because this looks to be maybe a late 80s or early 90s mountain bike. We have the 26-inch wheels. We've got a rusty headset. The housing and the cables are probably gone. We've got a U-lock bracket with probably no U-lock. The crank seems to be a double instead of a triple. Chain's gone. I imagine that the derailleurs are probably gone as well. And it's not in great shape, but I think that it is fantastic. I would change the stem. I'd install one of those longer stems. I would put the sweepback bars on it, keep the thumb shifters and the brakes, keep those cantilever brakes, probably throw on some cool stops, clean up or replace the headset, maybe replace the crankset, replace those pedals, put a new saddle on it, replace the rear derailleur and the front derailleur if that was needed, and put some nicer tires on it. For all of that stuff, I think that you could probably spend maybe $150. But if you have a co-op or a bike shop that sells used parts, you might be able to get all that for about half of it. And you would have a bike that's just as nice as that Miata that we saw, and then for $35 extra, that's a pretty good deal. So I really like this bike. I know it's not in great shape, but I mean, the best thing about it is when your friends are like, hey, what is that bike? You can just tell them,
This is an old Schwinn.
hey, thanks for checking out this video. If you enjoyed this at all, please consider subscribing, leaving a comment, or hitting that like button. Thanks a lot, and see you soon.